last 4 days have been very exciting for us at Greyhound. After Vishal Sikka announces resignation from Infosys, we've been flooded with inquiries. We don't mind the extra business for sure, but we've got, just to give you a sense, we've got about 100 inquiry calls,
Yes.
about a quarter of which were from the global media houses, of course, India media houses as well. But a ton of these inquiries have been from existing customers who are very large spenders with Infosys, and also with prospects.
Yes.
They all have fair questions about what has happened, why has it happened, how's it going to impact me, and the future of Infosys really. So
True.
just to share with you, this really isn't actually new. This started way back earlier this year when there was an entire heat up going on. Mr. Murthy released that letter.
True.
So Anshu, do you have a perspective?
Yes, absolutely. Way this row has spanned out, Sanchit, the important question to ask here is why did the founders wash dirty linen in public? You know, such public verbiage by the founders impacts not just investor sentiment, it impacts customer sentiments, and it also hurts brand Infosys. You know, the public verbiage some of the co-founders of Infosys have used, it only paints them in very poor light.
Yeah, I would actually agree with you. And one of the points that really stayed back with me from earlier this year were the entire alleged governance issues were actually spoken about by Mr. Murthy. By the way, I'm not saying they're not or they are. I'm not on the either sides. Although the board has gone out and spoken about the fact that they've spent a ton of money and time on getting independent verifications done about governance. Let's say even if there were governance issues, first of all, I genuinely feel about the fact that there was absolutely no need for a media trial for Mr. Sikka and the board really. I still remember back in time earlier this year, there was an entire episode and a ton of stories out there which spoke about how Infosys is not being managed well by Vishal, and there was no basis for it. I think that's absolutely wrong, and maybe that's contributed to Vishal's sentiment today, where it's actually put in resignation. Also, another point was that Vishal's salary. Was spoken about very aggressively earlier
True.
this year, and actually there's a ton of misreporting that was done. By the industry benchmarks that we have at Greyhound, Vishal Sikka's salary is per industry standards
True.
and is not out of the ordinary.
Yes.
So clearly, situation could have been better managed. There is absolutely no need for such bullish boardroom behaviors. Things happen all the time, right? And the fact is, you keep it within the four walls of a boardroom, and you don't take it to the world out there and wash that dirty linen in public, as you said, right?
True.
So all in all, it started earlier this year. We could see things getting heated up between the founders, the board, and the CEO,
True.
and the way this triangulation has been mismanaged over the last few months hasn't done any justice to the investor community, neither the customers and nor the public at large, really.
Absolutely. I think the two key things that have stayed back with me personally is alleged and also mismanaged.
Fair enough.
In fact, if I remember correctly, you predicted this the day Vishal's appointment was announced.
Yeah.
Am I right? So this
Yeah.
didn't really come as a surprise to you.
No, it hasn't actually. I tell you why. Because the day Vishal joined, I genuinely feel Vishal's a great technocrat. He's a brilliant individual with great capabilities, and he's the guy behind SAP HANA. So clearly, there's no capability issue there. I always thought it was always a fitment issue. He's a great technocrat, but somebody who needs to lead Infosys. It's a publicly listed company, also a founder-run company. You need a very experienced hand at sales. You need a hand that's been there, done that in terms of running a publicly listed firm which is worth a few $1 billion. You get groomed into these roles over time. And clearly, Vishal's experience before that was of a highly of a technocrat. Never been in the sales roles, never been in actually IT services roles as well. And that did sort of work against him. So no discredit to Vishal. It's just the fitment issue that I thought was always a miss somewhere. So clearly, I'm not surprised. I predicted this the day Vishal joined, and in fact, our friend Ivis Sones, when he was at First Post, we spoke about it at length as well. That We'll see how long will Vishal survive in that boat because it is a very complex business. It's made more complex by the fact that it's run by founders and a ton of founders really who feel very strongly about there. And these are all iconic founders like Shipulal, Nayanmurthy, Nandan Nilekani, very iconic founders in their own right. And there were times I felt there was a bit of miscommunication and probably over targeting as well. So Infosys came up with this entire $20 billion target, which I thought was unachievable. But the other way to look at it is that until that time, Infosys as a company never even had those big aims and ambitions. So Vishal did bring in that big aim for the company. I don't know what you feel, but
Yeah, I truly believe that Sikka was really giving Infosys a shot in the arm. He could have really helped Infosys
yeah,
catch on to the next wave of IT services. Had, his vision to help Infosys transform by the way of AI could have really taken Infosys to the next level.
that's right.
Really, that's
Yeah,
what I believe. Also, I feel, the ordeal that Vishal had to go through, it wasn't really fair
that's
for
fair.
him.
Yeah,
Had he had a little bit more support from the founders
that's right.
and more realistic targets,
Yeah.
very honestly, I feel he could have really made Infosys shine again.
Yeah, that's a great point. Look, I think we're mixing a lot of points in the public out there. We have to separate intent from action. While the
True.
founders have great intent for the company, but they necessarily don't know what's going to work in the next 30 years. So while they did a fantastic job of making Infosys what it is today, and the most iconic company probably in the country and the world. But what's worked for the last 30 years will actually not work for the next 30. So, the fact that Mr. Murthy has great intent, but he might not be the best placed person today to re-innovate the entire IT services way for Infosys, and it's a shame that we have to see Vishal go.
True. On that point, Sanchit, I feel that Vishal's exit from Infosys, it's not just a blot on Infosys.
Yeah.
It's going to affect the entire IT services industry.
Sure.
His departure from the company, it is going to affect the entire industry at large. He did shake things up, literally.
Yeah, I would agree with you, really. The fact that someone of the stature of Vishal, went out in public and spoke to the media and said, "Look, enough is enough, and I just can't do this anymore." That actually reflects rather poorly on the founders than on him, if you ask me honestly. And by this entire incident, this incident, and by the way, the incident that happened at Tata Sons just very recently, what the message that we have passed to the world that is that Indian organizations aren't really ready for global talent, and that's such a wrong message to be passing to the world that that we're not mature enough to handle global talent, and I'm not sure that that's the message we really want to pass around.
Absolutely. With Vishal's exit, I feel Infosys has really lost an opportunity to evolve, and not just Infosys. I think it's an opportunity lost by the IT services industry as a whole.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Until Vishal came in, there was no talk about the CEOs being actually positioned in the valley. There was no talk about hiring very majorly in the valley, and it was actually Vishal who came in with the entire concept of design thinking. He spoke about the issues with Infosys 2.0 and how Infosys 3.0 is going to pan out. He showed some respect for that, and he again emphasized on the need for Infosys as a company to be better aligned to global trends, which are of course coming out from the valley.
Sure.
So he did, and after that happened, we saw everybody, be it Wipro, be it HCL, all talk about how they're investing in the US market, how they plan to have a small design thinking or design center in the US
True.
market, how they plan to hire there, or how the CEOs will be placed there. So it was like a ripple impact, and it was all credit actually goes to Vishal and his forward-looking mindset, really.
Absolutely, Sanjay.
That's very interesting, Anshu. But you're also the HR head for Greyhound, and you speak to a ton of CHROs across the globe. You also cover HR tech. But tell me from your perspective, for any organization to go through such major episodes, by the way, Infosys did wipe out $3.5 billion just in one day of the announcement. Uh, what would the impact on the organization from an employee perspective?
Sanchit, I believe Vishal's exit has really, the question for Infosys right now is, can they continue to be the employer of choice after
Mm,
Vishal's
mm,
exit? That is the biggest question right
mm.
now. Also, there is currently a question mark on the company's ability to attract global talent after Vishal's exit. So
Right.
these are two big questions according to me.
It's interesting you say that. I was watching the media briefing by Ravi Venkatesan, and he said a very interesting comment. He said, the next CEO, whoever that it will be, whether internal or external. By the way, I strongly believe it's got to be someone internal, given the state Infosys is at. Uh, Ravi said that it's got to be somebody who understands the current strategy really
Mhm.
well, embraces the strategy, does not is not really looking to change the strategy, and more importantly, understands the culture and will imbibe the culture. So I'm not even sure if they're looking at a very forward-looking CEO like Vishal. Maybe Vishal was too advanced and futuristic for Infosys. I think they're looking at bringing back normalcy and just ensuring that the business goes on
Hmm.
in a stable manner more than making big bets. The quintessential Infosys, right, of playing it conservative. They've got so much money in the bank, but they still don't want to go out and spend money to acquire companies. So, yeah, I would. But as a CHR would tell me, would the impact on the employee morale? Look, we've seen Vishal has had a hit on the as a on his morale as well. When someone like Vishal gets hit on his morale, do you think it's going to hit bigger in the bottom of the ranks?
Absolutely, there is no denying that employee morale is bound to get hit. See,
Mm,
today technology is evolving very, very quickly. Talent is also evolving very, very quickly.
great point.
Yes, and like for example, Vishal's vision to transform Infosys by the way of AI. I think that was new skills which attracts the modern talent
That's
of
right.
today.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
Vishal gone and with Ravi's statements, for example, where if the perception is that the company doesn't want a forward looking CEO, then the question with the talent would be whether they want to work with a company that is not forward looking or that does not want a forward looking CEO.
Yeah, that's a brilliant perspective, and I worry about it that they're going to go back to
Yes.
talking bench. They'll talk about the fact that we don't have any bench anymore, or how we're using lean methodologies, and all that is fine and being spoken to death, very
Yeah.
frankly, over the last decade. But as you said very very nicely, that will the futuristic talent join Infosys
Absolutely.
is a looming question on for the leaders there.
Absolutely. So the question is not just about who does Infosys want, but also from the talent side, who wants to work for
Yeah,
Infosys.
it's a very nice way to put
So,
it.
Sanchit, I really believe that there are some lessons to take back from this entire episode.
They always are, right?
Well, that's good, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but you've been a founder as well. So, what lessons do you
Mm,
think
mm.
the Infosys founders can take back from this entire episode?
It's a very interesting one. It's never easy, right? Being a founder, it's like growing up a child and giving it away, seeing someone else parent it. It's never easy, first of
Yeah.
all. So let's feel for the founders first of all that if they are reacting, it's only natural. Right.
Mm.
Having said
Fair.
that, though, look, there will always be differences in how you can run a company. The way a founder nurtures a company with
Mm.
the passion that the founder brings onto the table is very different to what a professional management brings onto the table. The professional management brings in the poise, the process, and the ability to scale up new heights, the ability to go to the next level, which the founder may not be able to do. I'll give you a classic example.
Mhm.
While Facebook is headed by the founder Mark Zuckerberg, and he's also a technocrat, But you could compare that to a Google. The CEO position is led by somebody else, and the founders are chairmen today,
True.
and they understand that not every job is meant for everybody. Really,
True.
also the fact that separating ownership from control is very hard. As I spoke about earlier, that while the intent can be great, but there comes a point for every founder where they must ask themselves that are they capable enough to lead the ship to a rougher sea, or to, let's say, to newer pastures. There comes a time for every founder, and
True.
at that point in time, how do you separate control and ownership becomes a very, very critical question, right? But having said that, such counteractions by investors like Mr. Murthy are expected all the time, and it's actually very healthy for the company because it helps them be a lot more compliant,
Mm-hmm.
be a lot more transparent, and the management sort of always has to sort of go back to the investors, key
Yeah.
investors, and report data and be a lot more transparent, which is always a great thing, very frankly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Having said that, the onus to ensure that the new management team succeeds is on the founder owners, very frankly, right? The
True.
founders founders cannot be complacent, they cannot be sitting on a fence and just complaining. It's up to the founders to give proactive advice, great advice, timely advice, and act as true mentors. So, at some stage, there is some growing up to do for us founders as well, wherein we have to let others be in the limelight. We have to take a step back very rightfully and say that I'm not the best person to lead this anymore. But what I can give is directional guidance and not really specifics on the guidance.
Very well said.
Also on that point, Anshu, let's go back to what we spoke about, Vishal Sikkas' compensation. There was so much public commentary about how Vishal is overpaid, and I think that's a very unfair statement.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot compare the compensation of a founder to that of a professional management.
Absolutely.
Right? The reasons of starting out for a founder are very different compared to a professional management, which has been there, done that, and has an expertise to bring onto the table. And look, good expertise costs, right?
Absolutely.
So clearly, while the Infosys founders have all the right to question the management and Vishal, but they have no right to point such blatant fingers, I strongly feel. They must take the onus on making Vishal successful. The onus was on the founders and not so much on Vishal, if you ask me very frankly.
Well, fair, fair. So, from here on, Sanchit, what do you feel are the key questions in everyone's mind? So, investors have questions, customers have
That's right,
questions,
yeah.
The talent, the workforce has questions. So, what are some key questions that you think people have on their minds right
So, before I go at it, why don't you talk about what do you think will be probably the questions right now from employees and let's say the people who are actually interviewing right now at Infosys?
So from the talent perspective, I feel if I was to put myself in their shoes, the biggest question in my mind would be I am evolving and I wish to want to work with new technologies. Will Infosys as a company, one, give me the opportunity to work with these new technologies?
Fair.
And second, will they encourage and help me grow further in these technologies? So that as talent, that would be my top question.
That's a good point, actually. And it's interesting. I think while Infosys is going to battle a lot of these internal challenges, there are going to be a ton of external challenges as well. And one of the things that comes to my mind is Mr. Murthy going to come back into the board? In fact, he shouldn't have left the board in the first place, if you ask me very frankly,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to come back to the board? That's going to be the key question in front of the Infosys management right now. Second of all, is that entire process and rationale of hiring that next CEO for Infosys. Look, everybody has eyes on that, right?
Yes.
And of course, we have a perspective that it should be someone internal, because that's what the company really wants right now is stability. They have just written off $3.5 billion.
Yes.
They can't afford another episode like that, really.
Absolutely.
And Praveen Rao is a great candidate for that. And maybe, Praveen Rao is going to be eventually going to be the CEO for a longer time. And of course, and will be a great choice, by the way.
Mhm.
But the question will be who's going to be the next CEO, and a lot will depend on how Infosys chooses to communicate about this topic. Because look, a lot's been written about it already, right? The another question is that under Vishal's guidance, there's been a ton of investments in artificial intelligence that we spoke about.
Yeah.
Products like Nia have been accepted really well by the market, and more so, look, the fact is that he also launched Edgeverb, which is a new company,
Yes.
which is very IP driven, software driven. There's going to be a lot of questions from the customers of these products and companies, and
Right.
saying that will when after Vishal steps down, will Infosys continue to be invested into these areas or not? Because their customers who are already engaging with Infosys on this
True.
topic are exploring this for their organization, and the last thing that they want is to actually spend on an organization that doesn't plan to be invested for a long time in that product line, right? So I think there are going to be a fair bit of questions from, as you said, from the talent, from employees, from the investors, right through to customers and prospects, and of course the media and the analysts as well, like that.
Thank you, Sanchit, and thanks everyone for watching. If you have any more questions about Infosys and about Vishal's exit and Infosys journey here on, feel free to email us at connect@greyhoundgroup.com or tweet to us at Greyhound Group. We'll be happy to take these questions on. Thanks again.
Thank you very much for watching.